Hi, folks. I'm Greg McLawsen, the Affidavit of Support lawyer. I've spent the past 10 years representing green cards in federal lawsuits to enforce the USCIS Affidavit of Support. If you are thinking about enforcing the Affidavit of Support, here are the three things that you need to get together. You need to get your Freedom of Information Act request file to get your alien file. You need your tax records, and then you want all of your financial records for the period that you are seeking support for. Let's go through each of those. First of all, you're going to want not only a copy of your signed affidavit of support, but you're going to want all of the documents that were filed in your immigration case. You can get these from USCIS through what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. I have another video on how to file that. It's free. The only catch is it takes a little time. These typically take at least 45 days to go through. So if you're thinking about filing an affidavit of support enforcement lawsuit, you want to get started right away filing your free Freedom of Information Act request to get a copy of your immigration file. In that file, you will get a signed copy of your affidavit of support. Now, sometimes that's going to come back partially redacted, which means that some of the information is taken out because of something called the Federal Privacy Act, which protects the confidential information of US citizens. Nonetheless, it's going to have the information that you need to show that the sponsor actually signed the affidavit of support in your case. Aside from that, the alien file is also going to contain the original visa petition, whether that's an I-129F for a fiance or an I-130 for a family member. It's going to have a copy of your visa application or your adjustment of status application, the I-94 record of arrival, and all of this is going to help you or your lawyer trace the immigration history so that you can present very clearly to the court that the sponsor served as the immigration petitioner, that you subsequently applied for a green card or an immigrant visa on the strength of that petition, and that the affidavit of support was signed in this process. When you have that alien file, all of that becomes very easy to do. The second thing that you need is your tax records. Why? Because the entitlement to financial support under the affidavit of support is tied to income level. And when we talk about income in this context, the federal regulations make clear that income means taxable income. So to determine what somebody is entitled to under the affidavit of support, we need to look at their income for the period that you are seeking support and compare that to 125% of the federal poverty guideline. The difference between those two numbers is what somebody can recover in damages. So the two ways that it's easy to go ahead and request your income records is number one, through a Social Security Act statement. You can get that for free on the Social Security website. To do that, you set up a free account. You have to verify your address history. And if for whatever reason you're unable to do that, sometimes people have moved around and they don't know what their address was at a particular point in time, you can also go to a Social Security office and request it in person. It's also a good idea to get a copy of your IRS tax transcripts. These are the official records of what you filed as your federal income tax returns. Lots of folks keep copies of their IRS 1040s. That's fine. But it's also good to have an official IRS tax transcript because that's the definitive record of what you filed with the IRS. Number three is to pull together more broadly your financial records for the period you are seeking financial support. So let's say you have a 2-year period, 2020, 2021, where you were underemployed and you're seeking support from your sponsor for that period. Your sponsor, I can guarantee you, is going to want to see some evidence that you didn't have other forms of income during that period. So for starters, you're going to want to get all of your bank statements for that period. If you don't have these on hand, they can be requested from the bank, either at a very low cost or free if you can get them online. You're going to want to get those statements for all accounts that you had during the period. If you've done things like use PayPal, Venmo, or other online forms of transactions, it's a good idea to go ahead and pull those statements together as well. Likewise, if you've received any form of loans from families or friends, it's a good idea to pull together any documentation you have of those loans. Now, those loans likely do not qualify as income. They don't reduce the amount that you're going to be able to recover under the Affidavit of Support. But if the sponsor knows that there was money coming in from other sources, they're going to want to trace where that came from. So these things in the last categories, the bank statements, documentation of loans, and the like, those aren't things you necessarily need to present to the court with your initial filing, but they're things that the sponsor is going to ask for in the scope of discovery or in settlement negotiations. And so it makes sense to go ahead and be proactive and pull those together when you start the case. But going out of the gate, the first things that you should do in this order is number one, file the Freedom of Information Act. And then number two, go ahead and get your Social Security statement and your IRS tax transcripts. That's priority 1 and 2. After that, start pulling together category number 3, which is documentation of all of your finances for the period during which you were seeking enforcement. Hope that's helpful. If you have more specific questions, feel free to jump into the comments. If you would like an individualized assessment of your rights under the Affidavit of Support, feel free to reach out to us directly. We do free Zoom consultations all across the United States. Hope that's helpful, folks.